There's something different about people who grew up in the 1990s. Not better, not worse, different. Their brains were wired during a window of history that will never open again. A brief golden moment between two worlds. After the Cold War ended but before the internet consumed everything. After fear became quiet but before safety became surveillance. And if you were raised in that decade, you carry something inside you that the modern world is forgetting how to build. Let me take you back. It's 1996. You're home from school. The house is empty. No text from your parents asking where you are. No Life 360 tracking your location. No Ring camera watching you walk through the door. You're alone, completely alone, and you're fine. Because you were taught something that children today will never learn: how to exist without an audience. You made decisions in silence. You faced boredom without a screen. You solved problems without Google. You navigated conflict without a comment section to validate your side of the story, and your brain adapted. Psychologists call this unsupervised cognitive development. You call it childhood. While today's kids are tracked, monitored, optimized, and protected from every possible risk, you were forged in something the modern world has lost: structured neglect, not abuse, not abandonment, but a kind of benign distance that forced you to become the author of your own experience. Think about it. You wanted to know something? You had to wait. You had to go to the library. You had to ask someone who might not know. You had to figure it out yourself. And in that waiting, something happened. Your brain built what neuroscientists call cognitive endurance, the ability to sit with not knowing, to tolerate uncertainty, to pursue an answer over days, not seconds. Today's generation has instant information. You had delayed gratification, and delayed gratification builds self-control, patience, the ability to work towards something you can't see yet. You didn't get weaker from waiting, you got stronger. Here's another one. You wanted to talk to your crush. You had to call their house, on a landline, and risk their parent answering. "Hi, is Sarah there?" And you'd wait, heart pounding. No delete button, no typing and retyping, no reading receipts to obsess over. Just you, your voice, and the terrifying possibility of rejection in real time. Psychologists call this high-stakes interpersonal navigation. You built social courage that didn't have a safety net. Today, you can edit, delete, ghost, unmatch, swipe. You never have to face the raw vulnerability of being seen and possibly rejected in the same moment, but you did, and it made you braver than you realize. And let's talk about boredom. Remember that? Actual boredom? Lying on your bedroom floor on a Saturday afternoon, no phone, no notifications, just you and the ceiling and the slow passage of time. It felt like torture, but your brain was doing something incredible. In the absence of constant stimulation, your mind wandered. And in that wandering, you developed what psychologists call self-generated thought, creativity, introspection, the ability to entertain yourself without external input. You learn to be alone with your thoughts. And that's a skill that's going extinct. Today's kids are never bored, they're never unstimulated, they're never forced to generate their own meaning. And because of that, they're losing the ability to be with themselves. But you can sit in silence and not panic. You can be alone and not feel lonely. Because your brain was trained in those long, boring afternoons to create its own world. That's not a weakness. That's a superpower. Now let's talk about what you survived that nobody warned you about. The 90s weren't just dial-up internet and boy bands. They were a psychological transition point. You grew up in a world that still had secrets, where your mistakes stayed local, where you could reinvent yourself by moving to a new school or a new city, where your past didn't follow you in a searchable database. And because of that, you learned something critical. Shame is survivable. You made mistakes. you were embarrassed, you failed publicly, and then life moved on. Today's generation doesn't get that. Their failures are permanent, screenshotted, archived, immortalized. But you learn that you could mess up and still be okay, that humiliation fades, that people forget, and that gave you resilience. Here's what nobody tells you about being a 90s kid. You weren't coddled, you weren't optimized, you weren't given participation trophies for breathing. You were given freedom, and freedom is dangerous, and dangerous is how you learn. You rode bikes without helmets, you walked to places alone, you made plans without confirming them 17 times via text. You showed up or you didn't, and if you didn't, there were consequences. You learned accountability, cause and effect, that your actions mattered because nobody was there to save you from the results. Today's kids are bubble-wrapped, protected from failure, shielded from discomfort, and because of that, they're fragile. But you were hardened by a world that didn't care if you were comfortable, and that made you capable. Let me paint you one more picture. It's summer, 1998. You're outside until the streetlights come on. You hear your mom yelling your name from the porch, not texting, yelling, and you come home, dirty, scraped up, sunburned, alive. Nobody asked where you were, nobody tracked your steps. Nobody needed to know every detail of your day. You had privacy, you had autonomy, you had a childhood that wasn't documented and monetized and turned into content, and because of that, you developed a sense of self that wasn't performing for an audience. You knew who you were when nobody was watching. Here's the truth about your generation. You are the last people who remember what the world was like before it became a simulation. You remember phone books. You remember writing directions on a piece of paper. You remember making mixtapes. You remember waiting a week to see your photos developed and half of them being terrible and that being fine. You remember a world that moved slower, that required effort, that didn't offer instant everything, and that world trained you to endure, to wait, to work, to exist without constant feedback. Those aren't outdated skills, they're endangered superpowers. So here's what I need you to understand. If you feel out of place in the modern world, it's not because you're broken, it's because you were built for something different. You were built for patience in a world addicted to speed. You were built for depth in a world obsessed with surface. You were built for independence in a world that demands constant connection. You were built for silence in a world that never stops talking. And yes, that makes you feel like a relic sometimes, like you don't fit, like you're too slow, too serious, too skeptical of things everyone else accepts without question. But you're not behind, you're just different. You carry a blueprint that the world is losing, a way of being that's becoming rare, the ability to be bored and survive it, the ability to be alone and enjoy it, the ability to fail and recover from it, the ability to wait for something and still want it when it arrives. You aren't broken, you were built, and the world needs what you carry more than you know. So tell me, what's the one thing from the 90s you wish today's kids could experience? Drop it in the comments. Let's see if we all remember the same world.